Hey therapist, just a brief intro here. I am replaying a previous episode from
Welcome
last summer.
to
That
the
was one of the
Therapist
most
Burnout
popular episodes
Podcast,
that I
episode
recorded.
26.
So give this one a listen, and I will be back with new episodes soon, maybe in another week or so. I have a summer series coming on, but until then, I am replaying for you my most popular
Hey,
episodes
Therapist, welcome
from
back to the
last year.
program. I'm talking with
And I
you a
hope that
little
you'll
bit
enjoy this
more
one. Have a
about
good one.
careers, about quitting, being a therapist, and really how you can figure out what is the next thing that you can do besides therapy. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a mindset talk. Then we're going to talk about what are therapists doing besides therapy in 2024, how you can kind of brainstorm around these ideas. All right, so let's jump in. So I wanted to just give you some research. So, study from 2019, this research article looked at therapists' financial strain and turnover. And so this was a study done in community mental health, examined therapist turnover or when a therapist voluntarily or involuntarily ends their tenure or place of employment. And so that's estimated to be between 30 and 60%, and it was 39% in this particular study. The biggest reason for therapist turnover in a community setting was due to financial strain from the therapist. So I think many of us, number one, we have so much shame. You have your shame shawl all over you because you're leaving the field or you're thinking about leaving the field or leaving community mental health or an agency or your place of employment, but it's normal. So if nearly half of therapists are leaving their jobs, it's the system's problem, not your own problem that is causing that. I mean, it becomes your problem because you have to find a job or figure out what to do. But I think for those of you who aren't in private practice, just to know that it's really common that the turnover is high. The average stay for a therapist in any community setting is typically 1 to 2 years from the research I've seen. So many of us actually work in private practice, and that works for a lot of folks and it doesn't work for some folks. So I am really answering the question today of what else can I do besides therapy with my job? And so it's therapists who have made the decision to quit therapy. And I would say I'm not doing this episode yet, but if you're in private practice, I think there's a middle step of fix your practice. You may or may not decide to leave your practice. I decided to leave my practice and quit my practice. However, I tried to fix it. I tried to do a lot of things to see if I could love my practice and stay in it. Ultimately, financially, also emotionally, administratively, I could not continue to put more chips in that boat. And I really, after it's been nearly a year and a half, I think I really needed a break from entrepreneurship, just having guaranteed income. I'm going to do that episode of the middle step before you quit. Let's fix your practice if you're in private practice, because we need to fix it whether or not we're going to leave it or not. If a lot of people in the therapy space are just like, raise your fees and everything is going to be magically better. When you have been dealing with chronic burnout and you really have the symptoms of burnout, I feel like you need a break. Like, number one, first step, if you are in the throes of burnout, we need to find more ways for you to rest and replenish some of that depletion that has occurred, because your body and your brain is been in chronic depletion. You might be dealing with depression, anxiety at this point. You might be seeing a therapist at this point because of the way you're feeling in your body and in your mind from that chronic burnout, from the chronic giving without replenishing things. And I think the pandemic highlighted much of that was already going on before the pandemic happened. All right. What are the careers that you can do besides being a therapist? So I want to encapsulate these careers into a couple of categories. So one would be continuing to use your clinical license. So that would be a pivot, kind of a job pivot versus a complete 180, or I am doing something completely different, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe therapy adjacent, like using those therapy skills, but using them in a different way, and then complete departures from the field. So let's talk about that. So, what I did very unscientifically is look at different Facebook posts, what people are saying that they're doing, or of jobs they are moving to. So, some of those jobs that, let's just start out with using your therapy license, but not doing therapy. So, doing something that maybe is a little bit. So, that's what I did. So, my first move out of private practice was to do assessment. So, if you're a psychologist or a therapist, you can do assessment only and not do one-to-one therapy. It's a different modality. It takes different energy. For me, I'm constantly writing. I'm not in the middle of my school year. It's in the middle of the summer in July. So I went to doing completely just assessment only. So I do testing throughout the school year and I do no therapy. I had one therapy client during the school year, which was interesting. And I'm gonna be doing a group with a social worker at my district, which I'm excited about. Also, groups aren't one-to-one therapy. I tried to launch groups in my private practice, just didn't get it going. So, assessment is number one. A lot of therapists talked about doing assessment for a hospital. So, doing like intakes. One person was, I think actually a few people talked about doing discharge planning at a hospital. I do consulting for a school. I also talked with someone I knew from my graduate program who works for an online IOP program, so intensive outpatient program. And they were going to hire me to do some groups, but it just didn't work out because they were, I'm SIPACT approved, so I can do therapy in other states, but it just didn't work out for the state that they were launching to start that for me. That's also an idea. Like, could you work for an IOP program where people kind of go after a couple weeks? You're not holding them for so long. I understand that might be some crisis work, but it is different. So it's a pivot, but it's not necessarily I'm like walking in the other direction. So thinking about, those IOP programs, one person said that they worked for 988. So that's the National Suicide Hotline. So they were doing, hold on, I'm just going to look on 988. What kind of jobs are we talking about right now? Okay. So I went to 988. I just put in Google 988 careers and they link to each different state. And then, so I clicked on my state. I live in Maine, and there's a lot of different jobs on one of the contracting agencies. So that was like in the state of Maine, it's crisis and counseling centers, and there's a crisis services clinical manager, a fee for service mental health clinician. I'm just looking on this job to see what that, you had to fill out so much mess. Okay, we're not going to look at that at the present moment, but they said the person where I saw the post, they were making more than they were making at their last job, and they found it to be not as depleting. So I think just going outside the box a little bit, if you're wanting to stay clinical, just to see, can I stay in the field? Maybe it is changing the setting to a more supportive setting, or maybe picking up some contract hours somewhere else so that you can kind of dabble a little bit instead of like, okay, I am going to be I don't know, like I'm going to work in tech or something, which people do. Like I saw some people on, the Burnout Therapist Facebook group, and they would talk about working in complete other fields this juncture. So that's certainly an option. It looks like that was a lot of resources at that 988 for different jobs. A lot of people, interestingly enough, were making money on the side doing pet sitting. So I don't know how much money there is in pet sitting, but something maybe to do to make ends meet could be something, certainly pet sitting. A lot of therapists in that group were doing pet sitting. So something that I did for a long time. Okay, so part two is using your skills in a non-clinical way. So we're moving away from clinical, going to non-clinical ways. And one thing that I did for many, many years was teach adjunct courses. And so I've always been doing some kind of instruction. Probably, I don't know, I guess I stopped doing that some point in the pandemic where the school I was working for went under and I stopped doing that particular position. But that's a choice. A lot of people pick up courses that they want to teach. I think starting with the university you came from is really a good way because you might have some relationships there and some folks that might be able to connect you to teaching some more adjunct classes or starting to teach adjunct classes. The pay is usually not particularly high, however, for adjuncting. So that's always the hard part, but it's not clinical. So it's not going to burn you out the same way. It's always something to consider. I'm going to go back to clinical real quick. And I didn't put working in a school setting. So I currently work in a school setting. And while I know schools can stress you out and it does depend on your administration, I will say having those natural breaks in the school year, like having summers off. This is the first summer I've had off and I'm still podcasting, but whatever. It really does help because you're like, I don't have to go back for like 10 weeks or it's Christmas break. There's 2 weeks off. I'm not working. So just to think of like a school setting can be really nice in some ways because you have the natural breaks. And typically there's great benefits. So just putting that out there as well. Okay, going back to things that are adjacent. So I talked about teaching adjuncting classes. So working as a director, some people have really loved doing more administrative roles. So thinking about, do I want to lead? Do I want to be a director for a company or a mental health agency, for example? Again, I know that fit has to be right for you, but just it's a choice. Another thing that a lot of therapists say they're doing is utilization review for insurance companies. So they either approve behavioral health care insurance claims. So that's something they would review working for an insurance company. I know it's going to the evil empire. However, if it gets you paid and you can work and go home and leave your job there, that's great. So a lot of therapists are doing that kind of role. And I would say also thinking about working with therapists. So thinking about supervision. So if you can provide supervision for your particular license. So for me, that would be psychologists, or I think I can supervise counselors as well in my state. I can't supervise social work because they only supervise. I think social work only can supervise other social workers, I believe. I think that's how that works. I don't know. It's not my license. So consider if that's something you want to do. Sometimes agencies will contract. So I looked into that in the many jobs I considered working for a company where you provided supervision and then they had conditionally licensed clinicians there. So that's something as well to think about, or to hang out your shingle as a supervisor. Another choice. Another thing is to think about consultation. So I am EMDR certified. I'm nearly a consultant. I'm a, what is that thing? CIT. Now I can't remember acronyms because I'm talking to you. Consultant in training. That's what it is. I just feel some time a way about calling myself as a consultant in training. Just makes me sound like I'm an intern and I have a doctoral degree, but I won't go there. Maybe something else could get something in training. I don't know. I just don't like the consultant in training thing, or maybe just don't call me anything. I'm a certified EMDR therapist. And then when I get the consultant, just call me that. I don't know. I don't like it. So you consider, that consultation for something that you have a specialty in or you have a certification in, and there is some path to consulting. I know that people do that for IFS, for example, which is really hard to train in. So that's certainly something that you could think about, or other types of consultation. I have a specialty in brain injury, so people do consult with me, but I really haven't gotten a lot of consultation jobs from that. More people who know me and want to, like, can you do this training or can you do this other thing? So doing trainings is another way. So I think thinking of trainings, can I provide trainings to a company or any kind of service like that? So from the specialty that you do. I have one friend who's also a content reviewer for PESI, for example. So they review the different presentations that other clinicians will provide and make sure that they're kind of up to snuff and they are well researched and evidence based. So, considering like curriculum development, for example, could be something that you use your therapy skills for to do that kind of job. And I'm going to think of other ones while I continue to the last one. So, our last category would be complete departures from the field, right? And so, when we think about a job that's complete departure from being a therapist or doing therapy, I want you to think about all the skills that you've gained as a therapist. So for me, I've been working in mental health for 20 years, more than 20 years. When did I even start? It's like 23, 22 years. So I started in a hospital, worked residential, did all the things, did crisis work. Some jobs I even forgot. I'm like, oh yeah, I do have experience with that. I hear a kid running down the stairs. For good. Okay. So thinking about all those skills that you can bring to the table for a company. My brother has been in some kind of medical sales, and I've always toyed around on telling him because he makes a good amount of money. Can you hook me up with that company so I can make that medical equipment money? Because that sounds pretty good. But I would think that getting into that would also work for a therapist because, you're personable, you can make connections easily, and you can be salesy without being salesy, like not coming off as the salesy person. So considering that for yourself. Okay. So using all the skills, I forgot I had a minor in marketing. And so being on the interwebs more since 2021 when I launched a podcast, my first podcast. So I've developed a lot of marketing skills and I have a minor in marketing. So I could choose to use that and kind of work in business if I really wanted to. So I want you to think about the transferable skills that you have. And from my memory of marketing, like I was all of 22. So this was 20 years ago, more than, we won't say my age. It was a lot of psychology. So it was a lot of the knowledge that I have now that you need to be able to market to other people. Sure, there's technical things that skills that you can gain and whatnot that can be helpful with that. But really thinking about what skills do I have that I can utilize? And for my private practice folks, you don't think about all those years being an entrepreneur. So figuring out your marketing, figuring out billing, figuring out your EHR, those skills are really good skills to have. And so working like just generally within healthcare, I think can be a really good fit for a therapist because you already have some of those skills. So, because many of us have been entrepreneurs, we also have a good deal of business acumen now. So, if you've been a therapist for a while, you've figured out how to do a profit and loss statement. You know how to read those. You know what that looks like. You might know some basic bookkeeping, for example. You have figured out how systems work together. Okay, like I used Google Suite. I didn't think that's really a competency, but it's something I know how to do. So I want you to think about all those things that you do know and that could be applied to another job. So, what are some of those jobs that therapists have said that they do now? One of those, again, is marketing. Someone said social media management. So, they're doing social media. They are a social media manager for another company. I didn't hear, sidebar, I saw one post of someone being a coach because all of the noise, I think, on ads. So if you're scrolling Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you'll get an ad. If you're in this kind of like, what am I going to do? Should I launch an online program? That was me. I tried to do that many times. And only one person in my non evidence based research said they were a coach. So we'll take that with a grain of salt, right? So let's not choose coaching as our first one. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble though. Okay, if you're rocking it, we need to have a coach that's rocking it on here. Someone said they are working for a tech company, realtor. I've heard a couple people that are doing real estate now. Actually, I have a family background in real estate, so I thought about like, hey, maybe I could do real estate. That would be great. The job market, not the job market, the housing market though. scared me because it's just been a crazy housing market. I know that. A few posts I saw was working in human resources. So some people were working now in human resources. Again, a lot of people choosing to work in utilization review or working, I think, in project management. So again, using those business skills to be a project manager or to manage other people can be really great for a therapist because you know people, you know relationships, you know how teams work. So thinking of those transferable skills can be really helpful. And thinking of things you like to do. For example, when I decided to make the move to working for a school, I would tell my husband, he works as a school psychologist, I would tell him all the time that I was jealous of all his meetings. And I was like, that's not normal that I like meetings. I miss meetings. I miss the collaboration. I miss the camaraderie because I think a lot of people would say on face value, they don't like meetings. But I do. I still like them. I have learned, though, that some meetings, especially IEP meetings, can be really contentious. So don't love them all the time, but I do like them. So just to recap, thinking for therapists about first, jobs that you could do that are clinical, right? There could be a pivot, but you're changing your setting, you're changing your type of work, you're changing your modality. Doing groups, doing intakes, doing different types of therapy. I didn't really talk so much about doing different types of therapy. Like if you had been doing trauma therapy, maybe you choose to do like relational therapy or couples counseling, which is a completely different feel to therapy. So I just want you to think through that a little bit. Second would be therapy adjacent skills. So doing something like adjunct, teaching, something like working on assessment, those types of things. And third would be completely changing the game. So looking at those skills and then looking at ways to apply those to a job on the open market. So I want you to think through those different choices. Again, if you're in the throes of burnout, give yourself some time. Give yourself an on-ramp. So I would grab my money guide. I'm redoing this money guide, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, because I'm just thinking about it differently, but it's still there. But I really want you to think of more of like, what is my on-ramp for getting this job? What is my quit number or the number that I need to quit the job that I'm in or my private practice so I have enough of an on-ramp to do something else? So think through all of that. Grab my guide in the show notes. It'll be right there, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Joy After Burnout podcast. Be the first to hear new episodes by following the podcast in your podcast player. This is an informational podcast only. Any information expressed by the host or guest is not a substitute for legal, medical, or financial advice.